Hello, my name is Rudy Seitz, and I'd like to introduce you to Tiger's Eye. It's my 86th canon, and it's the piece that opens my new album, Meteorite. To get to know Tiger's Eye, let's start by listening to the beginning of the theme that recurs again and again throughout the piece. I'll play that one more time and try to sing along. Da 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 da. That fragment was the opening of the theme. We can think of it as a question. And now we'll hear the closing or the answer. I'll play that one more time and sing along. Da 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 da. Now let's hear the full theme, including the question followed by the answer. Da 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 da. We've just heard the soprano state the theme in a smooth, flowing, continuous style. In Tiger's Eye, the soprano uses legato articulation. One of the interesting things about Tiger's Eye is that the two parts or voices use contrasting articulations. So while the soprano plays legato, the bass plays staccato. The bass plays in a choppy style where the notes are clipped. Let's hear the bass state the same material we've just heard in its contrasting staccato style. Da 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 da. Now let's hear what happens when we take these two parts, the bass and the soprano, each playing in their distinct style, and combine them. We'll hear the bass enter, and one measure later, the soprano will begin imitating the melody that the bass plays, but imitating it in a different style. We've just heard the essence of Tiger's Eye. This is the core material that gets repeated again and again throughout the piece. But in each repetition, this material does not recur verbatim. It goes through change and transformation. To understand the piece at a deeper level, let's now look at the nature of this change or transformation. There are multiple techniques of variation that are used throughout the piece, and now let's focus on two of the most important ones. In order to get a taste of how variation occurs in this piece, let's listen to the way the bass sounds a little bit further into the piece. We've heard how the bass sounds at the very beginning, and now let's hear how it sounds after the piece has been going on for a little bit. So if you compare what you've just heard with the way the bass sounded at the beginning, that was the beginning versus this, which occurs further in, you might notice that, first of all, the melodic contour that the bass is using has changed slightly. So while the bass was going dot, 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 it's now going dot, 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 dot. So there's a note changed here and there to create a variety and interest. The changes that occur in the bass line and the soprano line are subtle. Typically, one or two notes will be varied in each iteration. So the evolution and transformation of the melody is one of the basic techniques of variation that's used in the piece. The other one is doubling. So you may notice that the bass sounds richer and fuller than it did at the beginning, and that's because the bass is no longer playing one note at a time, it's playing two notes at a time. The bass is doubled, in the example we heard, at the interval of the perfect fifth. This is a canon where the follower, in this case the soprano, is generally responsible for copying or imitating the leader. But there's flexibility in how that imitation occurs. And in Tiger's Eye, the follower is not required to use the same doubling interval that the leader uses. So while we've heard the bass doubled at the perfect fifth just now, when the soprano imitates it, the soprano imitates it using the doubling interval of a perfect fourth. Let's hear how that sounds. Just the soprano doubled at a perfect fourth. Now let's hear what happens when we take these two doubled voices, the bass doubled at a perfect fifth and the soprano doubled at a perfect fourth, and combine them. Now, when you take a two-part canon and you double each of the parts at an interval other than the octave, you introduce a great deal of harmonic complexity that may need to be managed and controlled if you are to achieve the sound that you're looking for. The reason why this use of doubling was feasible in Tiger's Eye is because of the rhythmic structure of the piece. The rhythmic structure is set up so that the two parts interlock or interleave with each other, by which I mean they generally avoid striking at the same time. Typically, when the bass strikes a note, the soprano is quiet, and when the soprano strikes a note, the bass is quiet. Furthermore, because as we've seen, the bass uses staccato articulation, we don't have situations where there's a sustained note that clashes in one voice that clashes for a long duration with a sustained note in the other voice. Every time we experience a dissonance, it kind of evaporates quickly because of the bass's use of staccato articulation, plus the fact that there are very few places in the piece where the note onsets between the soprano and the bass occur at the same time. Now, there is one place where the soprano and the bass do strike at the same time, and that is at the beginning of each 7/8 measure in this piece. Because the rhythms in this piece are so asymmetric, it can be challenging to identify the measure onsets. But to make that easier, I've created a clip where I've taken the bass and moved it lower. I've taken the soprano and made it higher. I've also reduced each part to playing just a single note so that all of the melodic interest in the piece disappears and we have pure rhythm. And then in between these two parts, I've added a third voice that just strikes a single note at the beginning of each measure. So if you listen for this middle voice, which sounds like this, if you listen for that recurring note as this clip continues, you'll know where the measure onsets are, and that will tell you where the bass and the soprano are striking at the same time. So we've covered the three most important aspects of Tiger's Eye to understand as you get to know it better. We've gotten to know the theme of the piece, and we've seen how the theme is articulated differently, staccato in the bass and legato in the soprano. We've also looked at two of the ways that the theme undergoes variation and transformation as the piece continues. We've seen how it undergoes subtle melodic changes, as well as how the theme is doubled using different doubling intervals that change between the two parts and change as the piece continues. And we've also talked about the rhythmic structure that allows this doubling to be effective without creating an overwhelming sense of harmonic complexity that would interfere with the enjoyment of the piece. The last thing I'd like to share with you is how this piece sounds when played on the clavichord. So here is my collaborator, Matthew McConnell, playing Tiger's Eye on the clavichord. I visualize this piece as the journey of an adventurous tiger traveling through shifting terrains. The tiger might enter a cool shaded forest and emerge in a sunny field. The tiger might pass through peril and danger and emerge in a landscape of peace and tranquility. Throughout the piece, the tiger looks forward, continuing to seek the next experience. I hope you enjoy the journey of the tiger as much as I enjoyed creating it.